This is the most hated piece of clothing in Japan. It's called buruma. You've probably seen it in countless anime, manga, or even video games. But here's the question. Why did Japan, a famously conservative country, force millions of female students to wear something so revealing for decades? Why did it suddenly vanish from schools and disappear from your favorite anime? And how is a secret conspiracy to defraud people of millions involved in all this? You've probably heard the lie that this whole deal started with the 1964 Olympics in Japan, when millions of people watched the Soviet women's volleyball team wearing buruma against the Japanese team. Well, this is complete nonsense and easy to debunk. First of all, in those same Olympics, Japan was already using very short shorts, practically buruma themselves. Second, just think about this. Why would Japan become obsessed with the uniform of another country's team that beat them in a sport that wasn't even popular back then, and still isn't today for that matter? And remember, this was before popular anime and manga like Haikyuu, or even Attack No. 1 had introduced millions to the sport of volleyball. If the sport isn't particularly popular today, it was even less so back then. You only need to know the following to notice how strange the adoption of buruma really was. Bloomers, the garment from which buruma literally comes, has centuries of history. It wasn't some super unknown thing. Throughout history, bloomers have been a symbol of feminism, counterculture, and women's liberation. Now granted, most of this happened in Europe, outside of Japan. But despite this garment being quite ancient by 1964, no schools were using burumas. Instead, it was common for female students to wear loose shorts that reached below the knee, which sounds logical. We're talking about young girls in a society where it wasn't considered appropriate for women to show much of their bodies, and girls who needed something comfortable that allowed them to move freely. So tell me, how did we go from 0 schools using buruma in 1964 to more than 70% by the 70s? In other words, from none to the vast majority of Japanese schools adopting buruma as the official uniform for female students. Again, in a society as conservative as 60s Japan, a country that to this day is famous for avoiding change, let alone governmental organizations, which not only in Japan, but practically anywhere are known for their slow processes. This smells kind of fishy, doesn't it? It doesn't sound like a natural change, but rather something forced, as if someone in the shadows was pulling strings to make this change happen. But why would someone want to make this change? Well, first of all, to understand this, we need to know why buruma stopped being used in the first place. You see, in the 80s and 90s, Japan had these stores that specialized in selling second-hand uniforms. It was a win-win situation. Families whose daughters were leaving high school or junior high could make some extra money with something they no longer needed, and another family that might be tighter on the budget but needed the uniform for their daughter could get one at a more accessible price, and in the process, the owner of the business could make a living. But then, Japan faced what came to be known as the burusera boom, a disturbing subculture where used school uniforms, including buruma, were openly sexualized. You can see this in popular anime of the time, like Gunbuster, created by the same studio that would later produce Evangelion, Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, FLCL, and many more. In it, the main characters' uniforms are essentially modified school sports outfits, complete with buruma and headbands. These same stores that sold used uniforms, perhaps unknowingly at first, began selling these uniforms to people who didn't want them for their daughters, but for themselves. These people were willing to pay much more money for these garments than the original customers. So little by little, many businesses shifted to selling exclusively to these individuals. What was once just PE clothing suddenly became a fetish item, and the connection between schoolgirls and buruma grew more uncomfortable by the day. But the real breaking point came with public scandals. One of the most infamous cases happened at the Singapore Japanese school, where administrators tried to enforce buruma as the only sports uniform. Students and parents immediately pushed back, arguing that the shorts were too revealing, that girls were being stared at during events like marathon runs, and that it was simply inappropriate. When Japanese newspapers like Asahi Shimbun picked up the story, it sparked a wave of criticism across the country. Suddenly, it became more common to hear complaints from the very people who had to wear buruma. Complaints like how you risked showing your underwear, or how it could be very uncomfortable if you were on your period. For the first time, the public conversation wasn't about tradition or safety anymore, as it used to be when some criticized the use of buruma. It was about the sexual gaze forced onto students. And not only that, little by little, society in general realized that from the beginning, buruma weren't even good for what they were originally created for: sports. They didn't provide support, didn't protect against scrapes, and restricted movement. And once the press started exposing these concerns, schools had no choice but to react. From then on, the shift was unstoppable. By the mid-90s, buruma were rapidly phased out, replaced by longer shorts and tracksuits. What had once been a normal part of Japanese school life vanished almost overnight, buried under layers of controversy and shame. But then again comes the question, if nobody liked buruma, and if they were a bad design, why did they start being used, and why their rapid adoption? Well, according to scholar Yuji Yamamoto in his book The Mystery of Buruma, Women's Bodies and Post-War Japan, there was likely an organized effort behind how quickly buruma became popular in Japan, and it is as shocking as it is disturbing. Here's what happened. But first, I wanted to share that I now have a Patreon where you can support the channel and help me keep making these videos. For as little as $1, your support helps helps me invest in better gear and resources. Right now, with a few exceptions, it's mostly just me handling everything. And with your help, I hope to grow and create even better videos for you. But if you can't or don't want to, that's totally fine. You're already doing more than enough by watching. The link is down below if you're interested. In 1955, the National Junior High School Athletic Federation, known as Chuteren, was created. Their original goal was to improve physical education in schools by providing equipment and promoting sports as part of a democratic education. At first, they operated with small membership fees, but after the 1964 Tokyo Olympics, they began organizing more national tournaments and ran into financial problems. To solve this, they invented the Junior High School Athletic Federation method. This method gave the clothing manufacturer Ozaki Shoji exclusive rights to use the federation's recommended label, basically a seal of quality. In return, the company would give the federation part of its sales, specifically 10 yen for every product sold with that label. The more products sold, the more money the federation earned. Here's where it gets interesting. Both the Junior High School Athletic Federation and Ozaki Shoji, wanting to maximize profits and taking advantage of what was essentially a quality seal, which allowed them to set prices as high as they wished, since it made them the obvious choice for every school. And knowing the federation would also take a cut of the money, had an incentive to promote a product that was as cheap as possible to produce in order to maximize profits for both. In other words, buruma, garments with very little fabric that were cheaper and easier to make. But why only for women's uniforms and not men's? Perhaps the federation could only grant the rights for female uniforms. Or maybe, who knows, there was another, more disturbing reason. You'll be the judge. Schools saw the endorsement, assumed it was the standard, and adopted the buruma, probably for disturbing reasons as well. After all, not so long ago, teachers in Japan had the right to inspect students' underwear to ensure they complied with the rules, so it wouldn't be the first time something like that happened.